I really wish I could disagree with conservatives on anything, but I can't. I can't think of one thing that I can disagree with conservatives on. It's not what you think, unfortunately. But the fact of the matter is, I can't disagree with conservatives on anything. I was born and raised in a conservative family, even though I didn't even know what a conservative was until, I don't know, late 30s. I didn't know what liberal meant either. I didn't know anything about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, other than I could tell they were frauds. That much was apparent. In my normie days, I couldn't tell the difference between the parties. Didn't know conservative versus liberal. But now, after the fact, I realized I was raised in a very, very conservative family. But when I say I can't disagree with conservatives on anything, it's because, as I've said many times, the conservative movement is dead. I don't know anyone who's actually a conservative, right? I was raised conservative. I know what conservatism actually is all about. Now, if I lacked a little bit of knowledge, and I just listened to the words of people who claim to be conservative and not dive too much into what they're saying, I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying right now. I would believe that, no, we actually do have conservatives in this country. But because I'm actually aware of what these people actually believe, what they actually do, what the movement that they are a part of is all about, I realize that they're saying one thing and doing another. I think, as an example, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. Made many videos calling out Joe Biden for his corruption and his dishonesty. If I were a BS enlightened centrist, I would leave it at that and allow you to think that both sides are the same, they're all corrupt, Trump, Biden, it's the same. But because I'm not a BS enlightened centrist, which actually just means closeted, quote unquote, conservative, I will add an additional detail that Joe Biden's corruption and deception is nothing compared to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. But be that as it may, not a fan of Joe Biden, never was. Yet, I see folks in the supposed conservative movement who were quick to jump on Joe Biden waving at nobody, even though he was actually not waving at nobody, he was waving at somebody. Remember the parachuting incident? He was at some event and there's some parachuters, I guess military guys, and they're parachuting down. And Joe Biden is waving to one of them who had just landed. And the savages in right-wing media, the greedy, grifting, lying savages in right-wing media, always eager to present the left and the liberals as just insane and no virtue to them whatsoever. They're just trash, they're evil, they want to trans everything and kill babies and all that nonsense. Jumped on it, clipped it, cut it out, make it look like he was legitimately waving at no one when he was waving at someone. the so-called conservatives are quite happy to jump on that. Now, it is my belief that Joe Biden was suffering from some kind of severe mental issues, mental decline based on his age, as was and is Donald Trump. At a who was worse off because Trump's a reality TV star, Joe Biden's just some old pop. So Trump is always going to seem smoother to be, right? I know that Trump derangement syndrome is a way to shut down that you disagree with, but there is some validity to it. There are some people who have such emotions against Trump that they can't think straight. That is a thing. So they wouldn't recognize the difference between how Trump is presented versus how he is. I kind of lost my train of thought there a little bit, but Trump as a reality TV star is very good at performance, and he's also not bound by rules, right? So that means his performance is a lot easier than it is for Joe Biden to perform in any way in terms of seeming to be coherent, right? Think about how much mental energy it takes for you to speak without rules. Anything goes, you can just say whatever, right? You can lie. It doesn't matter how ridiculous the lie is, right? If it's super, super ridiculous and the target audience doesn't believe it, they will just perceive it as you were just joking, right? So there's no limits. There's no limits. You can say the most ridiculous things. If you go too far, they'll think you didn't actually mean it or you were just joking or whatever it is. So it's a much more relaxed situation. So if you're in a serious mental decline, that's an much easier performance to put on versus Joe Biden now. Actually, standards being high for him, that he actually has to make a point. It has to be coherent. If he says something that doesn't make any sense, no one's going to look at it like, oh, Joe Biden was just joking, or, you know what I mean? Like, no one's doing that. No one's giving him any bit of anything, right? He's got to be perfect, right? Perfect. So his mental decline is going to be much more obvious for those two reasons. He is doing a harder job, so he's requiring more mental ability than Trump is, right? And he also doesn't have the performance ability of Donald Trump, who has been manipulating people for decades. I mean, don't get me wrong, Joe Biden has definitely been manipulating people for a long time, but nothing compared to Donald Trump, right? His big thing has been being a hype man and these real estate deals and whatever, fudging the numbers and whatever. That's his whole thing. Joe Biden is just a typical crooked politician, maybe not as corrupt, maybe a little bit less corrupt than average, but typical corrupt politician. Trump takes it to an entirely different level. So I believe that Joe Biden was suffering from mental decline. I was perfectly happy to point out whenever he exhibited these things. And there were certainly times where he, like that debate, for example, where it's like, okay, this guy, whatever, right? But I wasn't obsessed with that to where I had to make stuff up or pretend like he's having an issue when he's not. Like he's waving at actually somebody. I'm not going to go and, oh, he's waving at nobody, right? But conservatives, they were happy to push that narrative. The people pushing it, and the thing about it is, there was not a major movement on the right that was pushing back against the lies said against Donald Trump. If I were a right-wing media person, I could have said whatever lie I wanted about about Biden, and the audience would just be like eating it up, or they'd be silent. No one would have any problem with me just making stuff up, right? That's the so-called conservative movement. Now Trump is president. The other night he posted that the Biden FBI put 200 and something FBI agents on January 6th. January 6th, Donald Trump was not only president, but he was at the end of a 4-year term. That FBI was 100% the Trump FBI. And it certainly wasn't the Biden FBI, because Biden had not been president yet. This was when he got elected, that was his first time being elected, right? It's not like Trump coming back in office now, where someone could make some crazy argument that when Biden was president, it was the Trump FBI. Because that FBI that Biden had, Trump had it first, right? This is the beginning of Joe Biden being president, right? He hadn't begun yet, so he hadn't been in charge. He'd never had any control of the FBI. 100% Donald Trump FBI on January 6th. This is a major representation of Trump's mental state. But I can guarantee you there's not going to be any major outrage from conservatives similar to them pretending like Biden was waving at no one. Right? So Biden actually waving at someone, but they pretend like he's waving at no one. That's a big talking point, and they'll bring it up. So when you're having a debate and they want to go and say why Biden sucks, did you see the thing where he's waving at nobody? Right, when he was waving at someone. But those same people, and the thing about it is, we haven't even got to that point yet to see the reaction yet. I haven't seen any reactions yet. But I already know that there's not going to be any care. Nobody's going to care that Donald Trump said that the Biden FBI had 200 agents on January 6th. And he's urging somebody to do something, even though he's the president. Like, who's he urging to do something? Why is he tweeting out in the middle of the night for someone to do something about something that doesn't even make any sense? You want somebody to do something about the Joe Biden FBI, but it was actually the Trump FBI. This is why I can't disagree with conservatives on anything, because number one, we don't have conservatives anymore. The conservative movement is dead in 2025. Right? I was raised conservative, so I know what actual conservatism is, and it's not just about words. My family lived these values that these so-called conservatives keep talking about. They lived it. I never heard my family talking about values, family values. I mean, maybe some of the stuff they were listening to, the religious stuff on the news. I'm sorry, not on the news, but on Christian broadcasting, whatever. But my family, I never heard my father and my mother talking about their Christian values. I experienced their Christian values. I experienced their faith. But what I see coming from the conservative movement, the so-called conservative movement, is people talking the words of conservatism, talking the words of Christianity, but living in a very worldly, non-Christian manner. I see conservatives living in a way. So when I was growing up in a Christian home, people who behaved the way these conservatives behaved, and just to be clear, my family was hardcore conservative, right? Men should be men. I don't know if my father ever told me that he loved me. I knew he did, but you know, men need to be men. You're supposed to not be supposed to be tough, right? You don't saying you love people and hugging and like my father wasn't, that wasn't him, right? Definitely laid the law down, right? That he did do whenever I didn't do what I was supposed to do, right? All the tough stuff he did. But the loving, compassionate stuff, not so much, because he was very, very old school, right? If you go back in time when I was growing up, people who act the way that conservatives today act, like put their words aside, because if them professing Christianity, all this kind of stuff kind of muddies the water. But if you just look at their actions, the church I was brought up in would see them absolutely 100% as sinners, see them absolutely 100% as being worldly, the term that we used to use. No part of their behavior would be accepted as Christian-like in the church that I grew up in, right? All the lying and deception, the selfish behavior, the lack of compassion, lack of empathy, the greed, the obsession with wealth and power. I mean, it just goes on and on, right? Now, unfortunately, the attack on the LGBTQ and perhaps abortion would be things that my family and the church I grew up in would agree with. They would appreciate that. But almost everything else, the church I grew up in would look at these conservatives today as sinners, 100%. And it's an interesting potential coincidence that the two things that actual conservatives would agree with, these conservatives on, happen to be the things that politicians have been tapping into to manipulate the people. Because the way it works is you find things that get the base riled up, and then you keep pumping it, you just get them angry, this and that, they're killing the babies, and right? You get them, whatever it is that gets them the most emotional, so they can stop thinking, they just feel. You tap into that, you make it seem worse than it is, right? Your political opponents, they want to kill babies, So is that a coincidence that the two things that real conservatives would agree with these conservatives on happen to be the things that clearly politicians are using to manipulate the people, treating them like sheep? Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that all the other traditional family values and Christian values seem to not be a thing with these conservatives, but the two values that they are in alignment with true conservatives is abortion and attacking gays and lesbians and the trans community. Something to think about, right? So when I say I can't disagree with conservatives on anything, is because they don't exist. And the people who call themselves conservatives, the things that they say that they're concerned about, they're clearly not. Right? Like they talked about Joe Biden being senile, but Trump can be even more senile and silence, or they justify it. Right? Joe Biden tries to get social media companies to be careful about allowing people to post things that might be misinformation. And that supposedly is a big deal because they care about freedom of speech. Trump literally says, we removed the freedom of speech for something. I forgot what he was saying, but he talked about removing the freedom of speech. He's definitely been attacking people's freedom of speech. Suing the media for saying things he doesn't like. Now they're trying to categorize being anti-American or saying anti-American things as you're a terrorist. They want to surveil us with this Palantir stuff. So the fact that there isn't a massive conservative movement attacking Trump says that they actually didn't care about these things, right? So what am I supposed to disagree with them on? I don't know what they stand for, right? I am not a fan of American politics in general. More specifically, I'm not a fan of the left-wing movement. I certainly would take them over the right wing any day of the week. But I'm not a fan of those people who almost destroyed my life, who there's an extreme portion of the left who see me as less than human, almost like the conservatives who seem to look at the trans community as less than human, and other people I disagree with. But here's the difference. I can talk to folks on the left, not the weirdos that somebody like Ben Shapiro would like to talk about because he can paint the entire left as just like extreme radicals. Not those people. I can't talk to those people. No one can talk to them, right? The freaks on the far left. The actual far left, not the far left that Trump pretends, like, oh, Biden is part of the far left or whatever. The actual far left, like, they're extremists, just like any other extremist. You can't talk to them. I can't talk to an extremist right winger or an extremist left winger. But here's the difference. The left wing has certain ideas that, I believe are destructive. Some of those ideas, like I said, almost destroyed my life. I'm still recovering. They did 3 years worth of damage, much more than 3 years, because the financial burden is, decades of my savings that were destroyed because of some of these left-wing policies. But I can talk to and make my case with a ton of folks on the left. Absolutely, the liberals I can talk to, right? I can talk to a lot of progressives, not all. I can talk to a lot of them. They might be resistant, but I could say, listen, man, you don't understand. Some of those policies, this is what's happening that you're not being told. And I can get them to be like, oh, well, I didn't know that. Now, once you start getting beyond progressivism, you start getting to a little bit more far to the left, the amount of people I can reach become much less. But a ton of people that are in the center or left of center, and a little bit beyond, I can talk to, I can reason with, I can make my case. I can talk about things that they may not be aware of and get them to rethink some of their ideas. I can't do that on the right. Obviously, with exceptions. But there isn't a large group of people who would call themselves conservatives that can really talk to them about many core things. And proof of that is the fact that, you know, contrary to what liberal media would tell you, Trump, I think his latest approval rating I saw was 80%. So with all the craziness that Trump is doing, his approval is still at 80%. In contrast, my good buddy Joe Biden, when he was president and he was doing his garbage, there were a bunch of people on the left that were not happy with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was not very popular. And you can see why I would be able to talk to people on the left versus on the right. Right? There's a ton of people on the left that would agree with me on many things about Joe Biden, the bad things about Joe Biden, and that's why he polled very lowly. But Trump, on the other hand, can do all the insanity, lie so much, talk about the Biden FBI when Biden wasn't even president yet. You can say that stuff and it's almost no consequence. So on one hand, he's behaving in an unhinged way. He's behaving in an unconstitutional way. He and his movement has law-abiding citizens that are just doing their jobs, ending up being manhandled. And then right-wing media mocks them, and it's funny. And I think right-wing media wouldn't be mocking these people if they didn't think that conservatives thought it would be funny, right? Why would I, as a right-winger, make a video mocking a law-abiding person who's getting treated, you know, poorly by clearly a tyrant? Why would I mock that in my videos unless me, as a conservative media person, understanding how conservatives think, I understand that my audience would think this is funny, right? So as savage and dishonest and immoral and unhinged as Trump gets, still he has massive support from the right. In contrast, when Joe Biden was doing his garbage, on the left, a ton of people, I mean, let right-wing media tell it, that's not how it was, but the reality is, and look how he lost the, well, it was Kamala, but he was probably going to lose the election anyway, right? Look at how he was struggling in the polls during the last election, right? Because unlike on the right, there's a lot more people that are willing to embrace reality. And they're like, listen, we prefer this guy over the other guy, but this guy has a lot of issues, right? A lot of things this guy's doing, I don't stand for. They go against my values. So I cannot be enthusiastic or rate this guy highly when he's doing certain things. On the right, however, Trump is treated like a child, right? He doesn't know any better, right? You have a 2-year-old that knocks something over. Are you going to beat the 2-year-old? You're going to put them on punishment for a month when it's a 2-year-old? And they're so young that they may not have even intentionally knocked the thing over. Maybe they stumbled because they could barely even walk. Like, that's how the so-called conservatives treat Donald Trump. So therefore, he's able to do a lot of really bad things and not suffer politically. Again, let liberal media tell it that's not the case, because they like to focus on, because this is good content, right? It's an emotional thing. Any sign that Trump is falling apart or is losing popularity or whatever, it's great content. So when you see independents going away from him and other people going away from him, you don't care about the fact that these are people who never really liked him in the first place, right? So you're talking about a group of people that never really liked Trump, that they are moving away from him, right? Like, why do we care? The only poll that matters with Donald Trump is with his voters. And his voters, 80%, they love him. if I were to walk up to the average conservative, they'd probably say Trump was one of the best presidents in their lifetime. No matter all the stuff he's done, anti-American, division, the lies, the corruption, they still say one of the best presidents in their lifetime. The church that I grew up in would see people who think like that, behave like that, to be clearly sinners and certainly not Christian. So I can't disagree with conservatives because they don't really exist anymore. Or I can't disagree with them on anything because I don't know what they believe in. They say stuff, but the stuff they say, clearly they don't mean it. I would love to live in a country where I could disagree with conservatives, where we could have a debate about when does life start, how much taxes is too much taxes, how much power should government have. But that's not the country I live in. This is the Baby Channel, debate in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.